Another debate that was showing up on the Jeremy Fowler stuff that I thought was interesting because I can't really believe it's a debate. Aaron Donald versus Chris Jones. Apparently, 1/2 season of injured Aaron Donald is enough for people to go, I'm out. He's no longer number one. It's Chris Jones. Donald is on the decline, and it's time to start writing his eulogy.
No, I don't think. So this, okay. I do want to say that wasn't there an anonymous executive who had Aaron Donald as the third best
there was.
interior defensive lineman?
Mm-hmm.
Seek help. That's my advice for whoever this was. Seek help. I think that this debate of Donald and Chris Jones is more of, at least I see it this way, a nod towards the player that Chris Jones has been, is becoming, currently is, and that is just a game-changing interior defensive lineman. I'd still take Aaron Donald over any defensive lineman on the planet. I mean, he is... You mentioned it. He's never had a year where he hasn't had an elite PFF grade. Like, it's been absolutely silly what this guy has been able to do. The production is off the charts. He is a first ballot, no question, future Hall of Famer if he would retire today. He has long been the unquestioned guy at number one, and with good reason, like I just mentioned. But Chris Jones, when it comes to that sort of play of truly being a game changer, a defensive lineman where you have to point him out every single play. Not only do you have to point him out every single play, you need to game plan for him before the game even starts. How are we going to handle Chris Jones when he is lined up as a 3-technique defensive tackle, when he is lined up as a nose, when they slide him over as a 5-technique edge rusher? What are we going to do about Chris Jones? That type of player is why he's in this conversation with Aaron Donald. I'm still taking Aaron Donald, but I do recognize and respect, and I am actually all for us talking about Chris Jones as one of these true game-changing players on the interior of a defensive line. So that, to me, is the debate of why we're even having this discussion.
Yeah, to me, this is the most recency bias debate I think we've seen in a long time. I'm just dropping a chart in there into the chat to see if we can throw this up anytime soon. But Aaron Donald is, and before Aaron Donald, it was J.J. Watt, but a guy who was so far out on his own that for every chart or graphic you create, Donald exists on his own in a dot that nobody else, way apart from anybody else. Like, there's such a gap, and has been for his entire career, between Aaron Donald and anybody else in the NFL. What we've seen right now, last year, I think you've made a good point that Chris Jones has kind of bridged that gap. Chris Jones has crossed the Rubicon between everybody else and Aaron Donald, and he's just getting into the fringes of Aaron Donald play. Like, he had a grade of, 92 point something last season. Mm-hmm. If you look at Aaron Donald's career, that would be like a pretty bad year for Aaron Donald. That's like a relative down season for Donald, but still in the zone of where Aaron Donald usually exists. So from 2015 to 2021, Donald's grades went from 92.6 to 95.3. So somewhere in that range. So Jones is just getting into that category now, which is insane because it means he's crossed like the entire gap between like humans and Aaron Donald, which nobody else has come close to doing since Donald has been in the NFL. So you're right. It's an amazing achievement for Chris Jones to even be threatening the fringes of Aaron Donald territory. But let's remember that that's like the low end of where Donald has been over the past few years. And last season, which is what we're looking at to basically say it's a debate at all, yes, Donald had arguably the worst season of his entire career, but it was also the first significant injury he's had in the NFL. So in order to make this case that Chris Jones belongs as the number one guy, you have to agree to several stipulations. Number one, Chris Jones will back up what he did last year and do it again. That's by no means a guarantee. Number two, Aaron Donald's injury, his first injury hit season is now his baseline going forward. And number three, that at the age of 32, he's probably going to be declining and not going to be the same guy again. All of those things have to be true simultaneously for this to even be a discussion. And if none of them are, or if one of them isn't, it's still Donald as the number one guy.
Look, I say Donald's the unquestioned number one, but I think this is more of a praise towards Chris Jones. And you said it right there. Chris Jones has ascended to a plane that is closer to Aaron Donald than anybody since Aaron Donald has really been recognized as the best interior defender in the league. So, yeah, it's clearly Aaron Donald.
Right.
But
the other
Chris Jones should get a salute, and he does.
Agree. The last 2 points I would make. So the injury obviously hit Aaron Donald, took a bunch of his playing time away. He only played 11 games, so he missed 6 games with injury. That does a couple of things. Number one, it obviously reduces all of his stats overall, so you're not going to get the same thing. There's also an opportunity cost in PFF grading terms to missing 6 games when you're a really good player. It's not that the grades inherently ding. There's that chart. Now, Donald is the spot on the top right on his own where nobody else is anywhere near him. That, generally speaking, is the Aaron Donald zone for any statistical chart you create. He just exists in his own anomalous dot that nobody else has come close to. Now, Chris Jones has successfully, essentially, taken his dot and put it somewhere near Aaron Donald's. Like, he's bridged that gap between everybody else and Donald, but he's still at the fringes of where Donald typically resides. But the opportunity cost of missing those 6 games. Donald had a 90.5 grade last season, which is probably higher than most people thought he would have played at, given he only had 5 sacks and blah, blah, blah. If he played simply at that same level for 6 more games, the number would be higher, because playing at a high level for a longer period of time is more difficult than playing at a high level for a shorter period of time, right? So it's more impressive. So the grade, you can grade an elite level on a small sample size, but the longer you're able to stretch that period out for, the higher the grade is going to be, because that's a more difficult achievement. So whilst this looks like a down year for Donald, I don't actually know how down it would be if you give him 6 more games at the same kind of level. And, you know, when you watch him play, you turn on the tape, like one of his worst games of the season, grade-wise, was the San Francisco game. And I remember going through that game play by play to try and figure out, like, why was Donald bad in that game effectively. And I don't know that I've ever seen a single game where the entire game plan was built around not letting Donald influence the game, right? It was immediate passes. It was rollouts away from him. It was legitimate triple teams. It was like everything you can possibly think of to neutralize one individual player along the defensive line for 47 plays. That's what the 49ers ran on offense. And therefore, Donald did not influence that game, other than the fact that they had to spend the week doing that, like creating that as a game plan. So Donald is still Donald. And whilst Chris Jones might be pushing himself into that same kind of category, until Donald stops being Donald, he'll be the number one guy on that list for me.
Yep. Agreed.